Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christopher Saunders, Chief Maritime Officer here at RightShip. And before joining RightShip, I spent a significant part of my career at sea. And it's fair to say that experience still shapes how I think about inspections today. Today, I want to talk about how RightShip inspections are evolving, not in theory, but in operational practice. Now, our objective is pretty clear. We want to strengthen the safety outcome while reducing the friction that doesn't contribute to it. And it's important to say this openly. The system today is not perfect. There are areas where inspections create unnecessary workload, where outcomes can feel inconsistent, and where effort on board does not always align with the level of risk being addressed. But acknowledging this is not stepping back from inspections, because inspections remain one of the most important safety controls we have as an industry. The real question then is not whether inspections are still needed, but whether they're applied in a way that builds trust. And that's because inspections only work when they are trusted by owners, by managers, by charterers, and critically, by the crew themselves. And trust doesn't come from rigidity or the volume of inspections you do each year. It's earned. It comes from fairness, from consistency, and from a system that reflects how ships actually operate. Now, to guide how we are looking to evolve our inspections, we've anchored them in 4 key principles. Firstly, inspections must be risk-based, not checklist-driven, so effort is focused where it genuinely improves safety. Secondly, outcomes must be consistent and predictable, as so the same issue should lead to the same result wherever a vessel is inspected. Thirdly, consequences must be proportionate to the risk that has been identified, recognizing good performance while remaining firm on serious issues. And finally, we must actively reduce unnecessary administrative burden, particularly on our crews. Now, if we're honest, the system today meets some of these principles quite well, but in others, less so. So with those principles in mind, it's worth stepping back for a moment and just looking at the inspection system today and how it's performing. So at a system level, our inspections are functioning. They're not designed to fail ships. They're designed to identify where risk genuinely needs attention while continuing to improve how we reduce the burden on our crew. At RightShip, we conduct over 5,000 inspections each year across hundreds of DOC operators, and that's supported by more than 240 accredited inspectors globally. And that's important because consistency starts with people, and predictable outcomes depend on how consistently their judgment is being applied. Now, when we look at outcomes in aggregate, they're pretty stable, with around 9 out of 10 inspections assessed as acceptable. And findings per inspection have been gradually trending down, suggesting there's an improving baseline preparedness. At the same time, we've focused on reducing time on board. And with RIS 3.2, the inspection time has reduced by around 2 hours. Additionally, through our hybrid inspections, we're moving toward an average duration of around 8 to 10 hours. These are practical steps that reduce burden without weakening the inspection itself. Now, across engagement and industry forums and the conversations we have with owners, managers, and crew, the feedback we receive aligns very closely with the same 4 principles I shared at the start. We hear that inspections are not always experienced as fully risk-based, and that effort can sometimes spread across activities that do not materially improve safety outcomes. We hear that outcomes are not always predictable, and that similar issues can lead to different interpretations depending on context. We hear that consequences can sometimes feel disproportionate, particularly when a vessel is otherwise well managed. And we hear that administrative workload, especially around the closeout process, can be significant. This isn't a call for lower standards, it's a call for better alignment between how the system is designed and how it's experienced in practice. Now, that feedback has shaped the changes I'd like to take you through now. So firstly, the changes we're making are not about redefining the inspection framework. They're about applying it more consistently, more proportionately, and with greater operational realism, in line with those principles. And consistency is foundational to that. So that's why, when it comes to the severity of findings that we've assessed, we're going to be extending the AI severity model that we've been using for about a year now in PSC into RightShip inspections. Not to replace the human judgment, which remains central, but to provide a reference point that reduces variation and improves consistency. Because consistency isn't achieved through intention alone, it requires structure and technology to support. Now, consistency leads me directly onto proportionality, particularly when we talk about showstopper findings. In 2025, showstopper findings occurred in around 2.6% of our inspections. They're infrequent, but they are serious, and rightly so. But we also recognize the concern we've heard from the industry. Where a vessel is otherwise well managed, with strong systems and good operating discipline, a single lapse should not always define the overall inspection outcome as unacceptable. That's why we're working to integrate showstoppers more coherently into the broader validity calculation, not to weaken our position on critical risks, but to ensure outcomes remain firm and proportionate and reflect the vessel's overall safety profile. Now, the fourth principle was reducing unnecessary administrative burden. And this is most directly felt by our crews, particularly, as I say, with the inspection closeouts. Closeout requires real effort on board and ashore. And today, that effort is spread across all findings, regardless of their relative risk. What we're changing is the focus. Mandatory closeout will increasingly concentrate on high and medium severity findings, where corrective action delivers the greatest safety benefit. Closeouts for low severity findings will no longer be mandatory, not because those findings are unimportant, but because applying the same level of effort to all findings does not necessarily improve safety outcomes. By prioritizing these higher risk issues, we reduce unnecessary workload and we can focus attention where it really has an impact. Now, alongside these changes, we're also evolving how inspections are used within the safety score. Today, the safety score is largely built on lagging indicators, events that have already occurred, and sometimes even under previous ownership or management. We hear consistently that this can dilute the signal of how a vessel is actually being operated today. Inspections provide us something different. They provide a current view of operational performance, how systems are applied, how risks are being managed, and how the vessel is run today. That's why we're working toward using inspection performance and inspection trends over time as a leading indicator of current operational risk within the safety score. Acceptable inspections will support a positive adjustment, and elevated risk would drive a negative adjustment. Importantly, though, no vessel would be reduced below 3 out of 5, except where inspection is unacceptable, as is the case today. For dry bulk vessels, this represents a significant step toward a fairer, more accurate safety score, one that reflects how the vessel is managed today and not just its past. Now, as you could expect, this requires careful calibration and industry engagement, and we're committed to communicating clearly as this work progresses throughout the year. Now, even with these improvements, it's important to recognize what inspections alone can and cannot do. Inspections are by design, point in time, performance is changing, confidence degrades, and the assurance becomes fragmented. The system today compensates through this through repetition, repeated inspections, repeated effort. And that repetition creates burden, cost, and of course, friction. If we're serious about consistency, proportionality, and reducing burden, the longer-term direction becomes quite clear. We need more continuous, more shared assurance, and better visibility of vessel readiness over time, so trust can be built on evidence and not recreated through duplication. Now, there's two areas we're actively working on to support that shift. First, we're enhancing the RightShip platform to better enable inspection report sharing, so stakeholders can rely on the same assurance rather than re-inspecting the same vessel. Importantly, though, owners and managers will remain in control of how their data is shared and with whom. Secondly, as Steen shared earlier, through a digital assurance pilot, we're exploring how vessel performance, preparedness, and operational readiness can be demonstrated more continuously, and not only at the point in time of an annual inspection. The aim is not to reduce oversight, but to improve visibility, so assurance can be relied upon without repeatedly recreating it. So I'll close with this. The challenges we're addressing aren't caused by a lack of standards or a lack of intent. They're caused by the gap between how standards are defined and how they're applied in practice. Our focus at RightShip is to close that gap, to apply inspections in a way that is more risk-based, more consistent, more proportionate, and less burdensome where it does not improve safety. And at the same time, to work towards a system where assurance is more continuous, more shared, and ultimately more trusted. Of course, this is not a finished state, it's an ongoing process, and it only works if the dialogue remains open. So we welcome your engagement, your challenge, and of course your feedback, because ultimately that is what will ensure these changes can work in practice. Thank you. And I think we'll move into a Q&A now, so I invite my colleagues, Sachin and Darren, to come and join me.
All right, thank you, Chris, for such an enlightening presentation on the future of RightShip inspection. And I'm sure that's the elan of the new opportunities ahead. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's great to be here in Athens and to see so many familiar faces from across the industry. Thank you for all taking time to join us today. Inspections are something that everyone in this room has experience with, I'm sure of that. Very confident that whether it is from the owner's side, operators, superintendents, or inspectors themselves. While inspections have always been a key part of shipping, the expectations around them are continuing to evolve, and that's primarily the reason that you saw the future of RightShip inspection that Chris presented just now. What makes discussions like this valuable is that there are often different perspectives around the same processes, and that's a good thing. The more openly we talk about it, the challenges, the expectations, the opportunities for improvement, the better outcomes that we can create for the industry. That's what we are aiming for. So let's get started with this, and I'm sure we don't need any introduction to the two panelists. Chief Maritime Officer, Christopher Saunders, Dan, the Chief Operating Officer for us, the man who has the RightShip inspections for us. All right. Chris, I open with you. You've set a clear direction for the RightShip inspections. What part of this evolution do you think will have the most immediate impact for operators and crews?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of immediate impact, I think it's quite simple, and sometimes the simplest changes can be the best. I think what I shared earlier in terms of the change in the closeouts, focusing on the higher risk and the medium risk items, I think that's going to have a real material impact. We've heard that loud and clear from the industry around the burden. It's so busy in port, and then having the inspection and then having to get a closeout together in the days and weeks following that inspection, particularly where we're sitting around the sort of 20 average for findings, many of which, thankfully, are those low-risk findings. So I think that's going to be a well-received, I hope, change, and I think we'll have an immediate impact for crews and superintendents ashore alike.
Yeah, can't agree more if you have to write less number of papers to submit to RightShip. Anyway, Darren, from your perspective, where do you see the biggest opportunity to improve how inspections are experienced in practice?
Thanks, Sachin. And there's probably two parts to the answer. One is broadly, we recognise and we hear consistently that, and we see it, the crew experiences increasing demands, whether it be questionnaires, different types of inspections, sometimes multiple inspections for the same charter. So I think more broadly, the standardisation and alignment of the inspection experience for the crew is important. And what I mean by that is where we've got the opportunity to reduce and remove duplication between different inspection types, that we leverage that data through the discussion that Chris shared a number of points around transparency of the data. So if the data already exists, why do we have to go and ask the same questions yet again? So more broadly, that's the opportunity to consolidate and make that visible. Internally from a RightShip perspective, there's a number of initiatives that Chris just spoke through that we're actively working on. Each year we also review our risk questionnaire, and in the last release we reduced 46 questions from the questionnaire because we could see that they were being well managed and therefore we could reduce that burden. That also reduced the time that we spend on board as well, so we're continually looking at that aspect. But thirdly, it's the digital overlay, so where we can capture data digitally to reduce that burden, we are actively pursuing that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And since morning we have been talking about data sharing and collaboration, and you just emphasized on that point. So this is for both of you, in fact. Darren, to start off, how do you balance standardization with the need to reflect the unique context of each inspection regime?
That's a challenge at the moment because we see, look, in the case of RightShip, we've been transparent for years now around publishing our questionnaire and publishing the guidance. And the reason we do that is because we want to make sure that any participant in the inspections program that we run is aware of what we're looking at. That's not always the case. And so if we look across the industry, there are inspections that occur where that's not so clear. So that transparency across the board, I think, is important. But what that also means is there may be requirements that a particular port might have or a particular charterer that are different to what exists in other inspections. So making sure that's clear, the requirements, the guidance is clear. So if there are two different questions that the crew need to address, we capture those in a clear and transparent manner. The data is then consistent, it can be properly used, and those participants that need access to that information get what they're looking for. So we may have a high degree of duplication, but there may be indeed some differences, and specifying those clearly is important.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I can share some insights. We had a really stimulating roundtable yesterday on standardization, and it's a really challenging space. And I think we also heard from Sam this morning, everyone is looking to manage a particular risk, and it may vary, or there may be a focus in different areas. Today, the only tool anyone has is to come and ask for more data or to do more inspections. And ultimately, for standardization in inspections to occur, there has to be a dialogue, collaboration, engagement to find ways that all of the stakeholders who are doing these inspections can find some commonality, can start to align what they're looking for. There's only so many things you can come on board a vessel and look at, but I think that's why it's so difficult to achieve in reality. Everyone sort of comes at it at a slightly different angle, but ultimately it needs some engagement, collaboration, getting the right people together to really look at it. I think, Sam highlighted that out. How are we approaching capturing information about those risks today? How can we standardize? How can we align? How can we work together on that? But certainly, if it was easy, it would have been done by now. So there's a lot of work to go, but we're excited off of the back of the roundtable yesterday to take some actions away and see how we can contribute to that.
And I can tell you this panel is becoming increasingly popular with the number of questions that are flashing on the iPad. So I'm trying to weave this in as I speak to you, but I can continue to scroll the thumb and it just doesn't stop. All right, nevertheless. Darren, once again to you. You've spoken about improving consistency through structured severity models using AI. What does good consistency look like in reality without losing the value of the inspector judgment?
And this is an area that we've invested in RightShip, more so on the PSC deficiency side. As Chris mentioned, I think Steve might have mentioned that earlier today as well, and we're bringing that into the inspections program as well. So that the benefit here is we're not replacing the master mariner or chief engineer, naval architect judgment. It's more a case of defining a well-designed model that produces recommendations using AI that can then simplify the final review. So what does it do? That adds to consistency, but it also streamlines the final review. There will be cases in any AI model where there'll be outcomes from a model that may not make sense. And what we do with those is we correct them at the time, but we also feed that information back into the design of the model. So increasingly, the performance of AI in all applications, not only in our industry but around the world, will improve. So once we get to the point where, in the future, we should get to the point where AI recommendations are rarely changed, because the design of the model, the design of the criteria that goes into building those models is so well tuned that we get outputs that are assessed by experts and are confirmed to be accurate.
Awesome. I need to take this question because this is something that came up yesterday itself. And I think we need to address this. And this is about, the question says, are there any talks with the shippers or charterers regarding duplication of inspections? Chris.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely part of the discussion yesterday. So the positive news, yes, there is. RightShip, I'm involved, as well as I know Intercargo have been having conversations. And I think the outcomes from the roundtable discussions we had yesterday, whilst we didn't have any of those stakeholders in the room, I think what we collected is going to be really valuable for us to take forward into discussions with those other stakeholders, with charterers, ports, terminals. RightShip's definitely very active in that, and we're going to continue. So hopefully we can have some updates and some progress very soon.
Awesome. So building on that one,
Sachin, I might just
oh yeah, go ahead, please.
It is a very important topic, and we've discussed it this week and weeks in the past, and I'm sure, as you've mentioned, Chris, it's not an easy one to solve, and there's more work to be done. One thing I'd share too is this will take not only collaboration but genuine commitment. So none of us in the room want to see a situation where we collaborate, we define a way forward, and then we have some new questionnaires and new inspection types popping up around the industry, we will need commitment across all stakeholders that if we're going to standardise, we do it across the participants in the supply chain. It's not just the managers and owners of vessels. It's ports, it's charterers. So that's an aspect that we will need to continue to foster is collaboration and commitment.
Absolutely, and I think the roundtable yesterday that we had is rather an eye-opener because there's more of education that we need to give to the industry in terms of the efforts that are ongoing at the back end where we are trying to streamline, bring down the number of inspections and the time spent on board for the crew involvement. Anyway, moving on, Chris, for you. As you move towards the more digital and continuous assurance that we've spoken about just now, where do you see technology adding the most value in improving the consistency and insights?
It's a great question. I mean, it's going to have a huge role. I think we've heard throughout the day, particularly the role that AI can play. I think one area it's unlocking the level of insight, trending that is just not possible. And I think a good example of this today, we still judge a vessel by its most recent inspection. It's almost that's it. That doesn't take into account variability. The crew might be more tired on the last inspection. You might have had a slightly more junior crew, and you lose any sort of context of what went before. I think data, AI, technology, we can use that to surface insights and trends across multiple inspections or even across other data points beyond just inspections. And I think that's an area, certainly, we're already doing work at RightShip in some of the solutions we offer up for operators. And I think it's a similar sort of theme that we'll look to bring into the safety score, particularly around the RightShip inspections, as I shared, looking for trends, looking for reoccurrence. So it's not just the last inspection, it's not just a count of findings. I think that's a really exciting area which, as technology, AI is evolving, it's opening up those opportunities that just weren't possible in the past with a vetting superintendent alone.
Absolutely, can't agree more. But Darren, that brings me to the question that I see popping up on my screen, and I think it's time that we addressed it. It's been asked time and again, and this is the best forum to actually talk about it. The question says, is there still any human review of the closeouts or all being done by AI?
Yes. Would you like me to elaborate?
Yes.
The closeout, look, a couple of things that we're doing around closeouts. One of the meaningful changes will be to reduce the effort involved. Not to take anything away from the low severity findings, but our view is that there's no need to capture the root cause and the actions on those, because these are in the hands of top quality management around the room. They will get fed into the continuous improvement program and addressed in a way that the manager needs to address those. So in a way, they're more observations that need to be taken forward. So simplifying the process to focus on the high and medium findings is also key, because that gives the ability to focus more on quality. So that's one aspect. AI will come into the process to assist in review of the categories across high, medium, and low. That's an approach we're taking, but they'll also be reviewed by master mariner or an engineer as part of the closeout. So that's still there. The third area that I'd say is that because the focus is on the high and medium, fewer findings in terms of a closeout, there's also the ability to make sure that further down the line, and we'll get to this in the conversations and the work that we do, but to capture some real-time information around what was done about those higher or medium risk findings. So we're not coming back and asking about the low, but also it would be valuable for us to capture, following the inspection, what was done, what were the improvements that were made, so that if anybody else reviewed that report, if the charterer looked at your report, you could then see this manager these findings are in the past, they did occur, but they've been addressed, and the vessel's been managed in quality way. It's not about viewing that vessel through the lens of an inspection 3 months ago. But to get back to your core question, yes, we have the key team reviewing inspection outcomes to make sure that we get it right as well.
Well, I hope that addresses it once and for all, that it is not just the AI reviewing the inspection closeouts, it's definitely a human also sitting along with the AI. Well, this brings me to the next one actually, Darren, and this is kind of related to what we've spoken since morning. It says, you both highlighted reducing unnecessary burden. Where do you think these changes will be most felt by the crews on board? I mean, of course, one is not responding to, let's say, the low severity findings at the moment, which you will come up soon with, but other areas as such.
The way I look at this is more broadly across all inspections. I think it'll be quite visible to crews to help with managing fatigue, work rest hours, the challenge that crews face around dealing with questionnaires or PSC inspections, other types of inspections, requests from the office for various things, reducing the number of onboard inspections across a year. I think that's probably the most important aspect. And the way we look at this, if we had one visit to a vessel that could serve multiple purposes, that means the crew experiences an intervention, they undertake some work with an inspector, there's an inspection outcome from that work, there's learnings, there's improvements that can be then taken into the improvement program. But that intervention on that day can serve multiple requesters of information on that vessel. I think that's where the crew's going to benefit. So over a year, less interventions in that respect.
And you know what, I feel that the audience is actually reading my mind, because I see a very similar question which was about, I was about to ask you that one, but it says here, I'm reading off from the audience questions, specific criteria for surveyor accreditation will be defined by RightShip, and what do you have to say about that? We have a training, testing and accreditation program that we run. We invest quite heavily into making sure that we select the right candidates to undertake inspections on their behalf, but we train them, we undertake oral and written examinations. We also audit them as well. So we have 247 inspectors in the network around the world, some of which are internal employees within RightShip, others are contractors we work with in all corners of the world. So we audit those. We also make sure that we review the work that they do as well. So if an inspector, for example, submits a report and it's got some subjective findings, then we challenge those, because that's not right. We need to make sure that findings are objective, they're clearly supported by evidence, and then we'll address those and remove those issues. So we also follow up with the inspector in those cases as well. So there's quite a large program that we undertake to make sure that our inspectors are delivering the best job they can for you. We don't always get it right. We know that there are improvements to be made across the network, and that's why we audit inspectors, and we make sure that there's training and reinforcement of requirements. So we'll continue to work on that as well. And just on that, before I pass back, Sachin, we often get feedback from customers around the room and elsewhere. We really value that feedback. So if you do experience something that you feel that we should know about in terms of an engagement with an inspector on board, please do let us know, because we take that seriously, and we feed that back into the program that we apply to improve our inspector performance. Awesome, thank you, Ryan. And we have had a couple of sessions where we've discussed instances where the master has attempted to coerce an inspector. How do you handle such a situation?
This year we've had, unfortunately, we've had 4 cases where a master attempted to coerce an inspector or offer an inducement. We have a code of conduct that's also on our website, and it's shared in our opening meetings. There's a link on our request form. Our inspectors report that to us. So the way those cases are handled is we investigate with the manager of the vessel involved. Those 4 cases, there has been an acknowledgement that it unfortunately did occur. We have a zero tolerance approach to bribery. So in those cases, we not only pursue the issue with the manager around what actions are being taken to reinforce that that's not an acceptable behaviour, but on that case, those are vessels that are marked unacceptable. It's one of the items that we would see as a showstopper, even though we don't have a finding per se around that. It is treated in the same way. So unfortunately, it is in the industry. RightShip take a zero tolerance approach to this, and I think it's one of those issues that we all need to stand firm on to stamp it out.
Chris, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, totally echo what Darren shared. We're big supporters of the Maritime Anti-Corruption Network. I actually spoke at one of their events in Singapore last year on this topic, linked to inspections, not just RightShip, but of course PSC and other inspections that take place globally. And we're going to be working more closely with them throughout the year. We hope to have members of MACN identified positively within the RightShip platform actually later this year. So we'd encourage participation with them. It's something that is prevalent. We do hear reports not just within our exposure, but also in PSC and other regimes. So yeah, I would encourage people to engage with them. They can offer support.
Mindful of the time, moving on to the last 4 questions, just that's all, nothing more. Moving inspections into the safety score is a significant step. We just saw what you spoke about. And that's one of the questions I also see on, from the audience. And the one in the industry that has strongest interest in, how do you think RightShip is ensuring this encourages genuinely risk-based behaviors rather than simply optimizing for a better score? Chris?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think the RightShip inspection, the changes we're making to it in general anyway, is more risk-based, more proportionate, and the outcomes from each inspection and the trend through previous inspections is ultimately what's going to influence the safety score adjustment that we're looking to implement. So it will be based on the proportionality, the risk observed. The best performing vessels will have a larger adjustment, and those that are struggling, the equivalent, I guess, today of those achieving a 3-month validity with many high and medium risk findings will not achieve the same. So I think it will police itself, but given the construct of it. And it's already in pretty good shape in terms of that regard. We look at recurrence of findings within certain sections. So I think it's in good hands.
Darren, your thoughts on it?
Just to add, I agree with Chris's comments. One thing I'd also add is we know around the room here there are companies that since risk was first introduced nearly 4 years ago now, when it became the latest version, the latest inspection model that we're running, many managers have taken findings on one vessel and applied them across the fleet, and that's visible. Members here in the room would know that in your organisations you've done exactly that, and that's fantastic to see. So for us, seeing that reflected in the safety score and that fleet-wide performance that through inspections and arguably through company audits as well, as we continue this work, would be beneficial in terms of recognising that good quality management, so that charterers are not only looking at the one vessel, but they're looking at the overall manager as well. We see it in the data, but it's not as well as exposed as it should be. Hence the improvements that Chris presented. So I think it's a great step forward, and one that we'll look forward to getting in place.
And that brings me to the most obvious question that is coming through the poll, and it says, when are you going to launch these updates?
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely be avoiding summer holidays in Greece. I think we learned that lesson in the past. But I think some of the changes are certainly simpler. The showstopper findings, the low severity closeout change, these are more procedural. So we'll be looking to get those out as soon as possible, so in the next month or two, I believe. Clearly the safety score, I think anyone who's been around long enough will know whenever we do anything with the safety score, that's something we have to be very cautious with. We have to do a lot of preparation, a lot of modeling, and we also need to engage, outwards with industry to warm people up to the change, to take feedback, and to prepare a timeline for that. So there's still a fair bit of work to do on that. We'll be reaching out, engaging, but we're hopeful that that's something we can do within this year. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So 2026 is the year. Look forward to it. Anyway, mindful of the time, the last 4 minutes and counting. What would be a high-trust inspection system looking like in practice, Darren?
So my view on this is clear standards, clear guidance. So the owner and the manager know exactly what is being inspected. But also, if we look at it from the other perspective, there's charterers, there's ports, there's obviously different stakeholders that will be looking for information on the vessel. So if it was structured in a way where there was one report that gave findings, the clear findings, but also the improvements and the actions taken by the manager since that inspection, so that for example, a charterer could look at one report and see all of that in one place and not feel the need to send another inspector on board or send multiple questionnaires. For me, I think that's a lot of value. It's a long way. There's a lot of work for us to get there, but I think that's what a high trust inspection would look like. To add to that, over time, the confidence would grow if the performance matched the inspection report, so that the last thing we'd want is for a charter to experience a problem with a vessel that had a high class output from an inspection report point of view. So trust in terms of the confidence that will form over time, I think, is what we would look to see.
So it's the most important word, trust, which has been mentioned quite a few times this morning. Chris, your thoughts on this one?
I mean, ultimately, a high trust inspection environment, it's pretty simple. There'd be less inspections taking place on each individual vessel. That would tell us we'd cracked it. But I think to get there, as you say, trust, there's a lot of steps we need to make. There's got to be trust in the standard, the checklist, that's covering everything that each stakeholder needs to be able to leverage it. There needs to be trust in those who are performing the inspections, as Darren shared, around the quality standards, the training, the accreditation, that you can trust that and reuse it. There needs to be trust as well, and we heard this yesterday, around how that inspection outcome is actually going to be used. And I think some of that is where there's some work to do, because not everyone needs a full inspection report. Not everyone would know how to handle a full inspection report, dare I say responsibly, or make the right decisions with it. And we heard certainly some examples and feedback of that. So finding a level of data or insight that is actionable and allows the different stakeholders to make decisions and manage risk effectively, and to be able to trust it is also an important factor. And I think another thing that came up yesterday, which is important one to understand of where we maybe break down today in terms of the reuse, is the recency. Because I think we heard loud and clear that actually some of the problem is a 9, 10, 11-month-old inspection is not good enough, it's not recent enough for the stakeholders, and that's why they intervene with a new inspection. So there's lots to unpack there and discuss with charterers, ports, terminals, insurers, anyone who has a need for inspections today.
Right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Darren. Mindful of the time, the clock is ticking, the last 5 seconds before we blow up. But thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for joining this session. Hopefully today's conversation has given you some useful perspective with a promise from the two gentlemen here that 2026 is here to deliver in terms of the RightShip inspection outcomes, and you can look forward to it. So thank you for your time, and thank you for being here, Chris and Darren. Pleasure.